projects, Colombo Street, etc. On page 536, well, 499 to 536, which is on that, the first of the supplementary. Is that right?
That's right. Is it?
Here it is.
Here it is.
Yep. Yeah, 485 is where the report begins. All right, so I think that before we come to, well, actually, we might as well have a mover and a seconder so that we can, and then we'll open it up. I think I'll start with the presentation, questions, and then the debate. So would you like to move that, and who would like to second that? David East. Right. So perhaps can I hand over to you first, perhaps to give us a bit of a walk through. I think probably the most significant issue in here is the location of the cycleway down Chewham Street, which becomes one way west to east. So perhaps if we could start there.
Perhaps I'll just start with a bit of an overview of the projects per se and the consultation we've gone through, then hand over to Mr. Cheeseborough, who can give us a bit more of a detailed explanation of the safety components of the proposed cycleway, if that's all right by you, Madam Chair.
Yes, that's fine.
So at the council meeting on the 11th of September, council endorsed consultation to be undertaken on the draft concept designs for 3 projects, and these are all included to give effect to the first phase transport projects of an accessible city. The changes relate to Colombo Street from Hereford Street to St Asaph, and that's really about making that a more pedestrian and cycle friendly, as it sits within the slow core and will help support development in and around that area. The two-waying of Litchfield Street from Durham to Manchester Street, and essentially, as the Mayor has just referenced, the one-waying or the continuing one-waying of Chewham Street from Durham through to Barbados. So those are the 3 key components that we went out and consulted on from the 17th of September to the 8th of October. As you would have heard, there were a few issues that came up. The proposed location of the cycleway is one of the key ones as it relates to the proposed bus interchange and the Justice Emergency Services Precinct. There were, however, a couple of other issues which I'd like to touch on perhaps before we get into the substantive debate on that issue. Other issues that came up were in relation to the loss of on-street car parking, and in particularly the timing of car parks, i.e. P5s, P60s, that sort of thing. And we've subsequently gone back and met with the majority of people who have raised issues in relation to that and looked to resolve those issues in terms of the timing and location of car parks adjacent to existing and proposed activities. So I think we've managed to address most of the concerns raised in relation to car parking. The other key issue was at the moment, if you're going along Litchfield Street heading in an east direction, at the moment the left turn into Colombo is currently technically banned, but everyone does it anyway. And what we've gone out and consulted on was really reintroducing or putting that ban back in. We received quite a bit of correspondence in relation to that and subsequently met with some developers within the retail precinct about their concerns about that ban being put in place. We've come to an agreement which they're pretty comfortable with, which would be essentially enabling or continue to enable private vehicles left turning from Litchfield Street into Colombo Street North for a period of time until such time that essentially a Litchfield Street or similar type car park is introduced. So that was one of the other major issues that was raised by submitters, and I think we've mitigated their concerns by the proposal that we've put in front of Council. So the other substantive issue is the location of the proposed cycleway on Chewham Street, and I'll hand over to Tim for that, other than to say that we've certainly been through an exhaustive process in relation to it. It's not a recommendation that we've put before Council lightly. And we also have a couple of the safety auditors who the ITE committee will be familiar with, but we've got them here as well if the Council wants safety audit advice, and they're the ones who have provided us with the advice as to why it should be on the north side. But right now I'll hand over to Mr Cheeseborough to give you a bit of an overview of that.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Madam Chair. Accessible City proposes, as part of a number of the transport proposals in it, a network of separated cycleways, key cycleways across the central city and into the central city to protect the more nervous cyclists from adjacent traffic. That was a very strong point of feedback Council received back in 2011 through Share an Idea. Many people came to us and said, we consider cycling every day in the central city and across Christchurch if we delivered a network of separated cycleways. So very early on in the preparation of an accessible city, proposals were put into the draft plan to deliver a network of key cycle routes, not on every street in the central city, but key cycle routes into and across the central city that were largely separated from traffic. In parallel with that, Council, of course, has been proposing a network of city-wide major cycle routes. Again, largely separated from traffic on most of those facilities. And so the challenge for us in delivering the network of key cycle routes in the central city was to achieve a seamless network of facilities across the city for nervous, inexperienced pedal cyclists to be able to come into the city and travel across the city on largely separated facilities. So the considerations always around the Chewham Street proposal and others in the central city have been that the design widths and general quality and appearance of those facilities should be generally similar for cyclist experience across the city. And we are looking, again, as I stress, at more nervous, inexperienced cyclists. There are particular challenges in how cyclists deal with intersections. It's okay to separate cyclists from traffic as they're travelling along a road, but the key issue is when they get to intersections, how do they handle the manoeuvres at them? Most importantly, the key aspect of all of these facilities was simplicity. How do we achieve designs and usage of this facility that is inherently simple and intuitive for any cyclist to use? So we turn to Chewham Street and the issue that we have before us today. Chewham Street's one half of a proposed east-west cycleway across the southern part of the central city to deliver that level of separation for cyclists. The precincts in the existing and new central city it's intended to service and anchor projects it's intended to service are variously the hospital, the Justice and Emergency Services precinct, where we're expecting a lot of cycle parking in there to service the 1,500 staff and people that will be there, the bus interchange itself, where it is a transport interchange. There will be cycle facilities, storage lockers and racks within the building, I think for about 80 cyclists. Travel to and from CPIT campus on the eastern part of the southern central city, the eastern part of the retail precinct and the south frame. So there are a number of major facilities lying along that southern part of the city. Very early on in the preparation of an accessible city, we looked at a number of route options to deliver that east-west route. Lichfield and a number of these have been recently revisited in the Abley report that councillors have before you that's recently been commissioned by Environment Canterbury on behalf of the Joint Technical Panel. So the routes we primarily looked at, given that we took as a given the idea of taking cyclists off of Morehouse Avenue. It's 50, 60,000 vehicles a day. We consider that completely incompatible with the proposals we're looking at here. So that was dismissed as a viable option very early on. So we looked variously at Litchfield Street, and as Richard has just said, we had 2 pre-existing parking buildings off Litchfield Street beforehand, and as the retail precinct appeared in the blueprint, the recovery plan, it was reasonable for us to assume that there would be significant parking facilities on Litchfield Street, and the recovery plan had proposed it going 2-way. So for those very reasons, the sheer volume of traffic we might expect in and out of 2 major parking buildings and with a road that was 2-way, we considered it would be a real challenge for us to deliver separated facilities on Litchfield Street. We then looked at the South Frame. The issues with the South Frame are that at the very western end, there are obviously a number of land holdings around the health precinct there that prevents a continuous unbroken facility all the way through from Hagley Park at one end right through the innovation precinct to CPIT at the other end, and there are other laneway and land holding complications within the innovation precinct as well. The primary traffic problem with the South Frame, leaving aside the land issues, is actually that the South Frame is only 100 metres north to south. And so to deliver a good standard of facility for cyclists wishing to travel end to end through it, which a number of these journeys will be, was that they have to keep stopping at every individual north-south street, and we only have 100 metres to deliver a nice safe crossing for them at those locations. And so there were a number of safety and traffic flow complications in delivering that. So that we then turned our attention to St Asaph and Chewham Streets. So the proposal in the plan was for the westbound facility to be placed on St Asaph Street, where a lot of cyclists are already travelling along there at the moment anyway, on the left-hand side of traffic is the natural direction for cyclists to take. We then looked at Chewham Street, and we have a joint technical panel between council and SERA staff that looks at all of this. And because of the blueprint location of the interchange on the northern side of Chewham Street, our immediate early designs for Chewham Street did in fact ask our design team to look at the facility exactly as council is being requested to by submitters today, to consider the facility on the south side of Chewham Street because of that interaction with the interchange. So we asked the council's design team, who were designing these projects, to start the design by looking at a south side facility on Chewham Street. Fortuitously, that is the same design as who are actually working for council at the moment on the delivery of the major cycle routes network. So they knew what we were looking for in terms of the quality and the safety of the facilities. They raised a number of concerns with a south side facility back to the joint technical panel. Those were primarily, in their view, delivering an eastbound facility on the south side of Chewham Street was not intuitive for nervous cyclists. Most cyclists will choose naturally, as in most of their journeys, to be on the left-hand side of traffic. So we were asking them through this one facility to be travelling on the right-hand side of traffic and on the non-intuitive side. So that immediately creates an inconsistency in their view with the rest of the major cycleway network and all of the cycleways in the central city, where intuitively all of the facilities are naturally on the left-hand side. There were then worries about the complexity of how cyclists would travel through the intersections of Montreal, Durham, Colombo and Manchester Streets if cyclists were on the wrong side of the traffic and on the non-intuitive right-hand side. Particular problems there are for those cyclists, small in number, but who were wishing to still turn left into the central city destinations, including, as I've just said, the Justice Precinct, the interchange itself, where cycle parking is provided, and into the retail precinct and the other activities to the north, albeit that there were other activities proposed to the south. There's a general truism in safety terms about safety in numbers. And the more activities that happen at any given location, which is borne out by the statistics that Dr. Shane Turner has looked at for us, that it is actually the rarity of that left-hand turn, potential left-hand turn across those intersections, and cyclists that might get a bit frustrated, waiting for signals to change, that they might just give it a go and turn left, beyond the fact that it's actually a very complicated manoeuvre. So the delivery of the cycle network citywide, which will come with the intuitive change of delivering separated cycleways. People will get used to very quickly using separated cycleways, where when they get to signalled intersections and they want to turn right, they will travel ahead, join the right turn lane, and then travel on from there. And that will happen citywide, as it's happened in every other city worldwide, given that most of them travel on the other side of the road. But every city worldwide, cyclists using separated facilities get into the habit of travelling ahead and then turning right. It's a very safe manoeuvre and can be dealt with very simply with signals. We could not deliver that simple arrangement with a south side facility. Now, we had a dilemma as a joint technical panel at that point, because our design engineers had actually said to us, they recommended to us that their view was that they were requesting permission to look again at the north side facility and to put it past the front of Justice and the interchange. Because of the magnitude of that decision, the joint technical panel asked for our design team to pull together an independent workshop of specialists. So these were people that had worked on the major cycle route network, they were signal design engineers, there were safety engineers, and they were joined by Dr. Glenn Corey of the University of Canterbury, who's spoken to council in the past on behalf of Spokes. And they looked at a number of pros and cons of, do we do this facility on the south or the north side of Chewham Street? And some of the specialists involved in that initially started that conversation from the point of view of preferring the south side facility. At the end of that workshop, which I didn't attend, but at the end of the workshop, their conclusion was that the balance of advantage lay in the north side facility, providing that we considered suitable design and remedial mitigation measures across the front of the interchange and the Justice Precinct. And so the process has then followed on from there in terms of the designing of the two key access crossings into the Justice Precinct and the interchange itself. So, Madam Chair, that is really the background to the proposal to put the cycleway on the north side that is summarised in the papers that I believe you have. Yes, Richard's just reminded me, and also, as you'll see, summarised within your papers, including the Abley report for Environment Canterbury on behalf of the Joint Technical Panel. We've had a number of independent safety audits carried out both on the three traffic schemes you have before you this morning, but a specific focus within those on the cycle route facility itself, and then further detailed examinations and safety audits of the interchange access arrangements.
Sorry, have we got diagrams?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
On that, I'm hoping the staff have got a summary of the table that came to the GovT committee, and I think that was a memorandum which Richard sent us, was dated the 28th of November. It's got the coloured chart.
So there are councillors are just receiving a diagram that spatially looks at some of the conclusions of that workshop. The red blocks are broadly mapped. So on one side of the sheet it shows the north side facility, and the other side of the street it shows the south side. So I guess if we start with the south side, so as you can see there, and these were the broad outcomes from the workshop. So the broad issues there were, on the south side, the number of conflict points, which is not the only issue we've been tackling with this, but potentially there are a larger number of accesses across that cycleway on the southern side due to the provisions of the South Frame planning framework and the expected number of land uses and businesses there. As I've just summarised for council, the second box there is about the level of necessary controls to deliver the level of safety cyclists will be expecting at the intersections. And our engineers, our design engineers, signal engineers have advised us to deliver a really safe facility at those key main road intersections. We may be looking at a 4 or 5 phase signal arrangement. So in other words, it takes within the 80 seconds or so that traffic signals click around and everyone gets their go at an intersection, we may need 5 cycles. Most of the signal cycles in the central city are 2 phases, some are 3, and it is that simplicity again. One approach gets the go, next approach gets the go, and maybe we have a pedestrian cycle within it, and it's quite simple. In this case, in order to deliver all of those safe cycle movements, we were being advised that we may need 4 or 5 phases of signals. Now, cyclists travelling along there then in an 80-second signal cycle might only get 12 seconds in 80 to make their move safely. And so another worry about that then is risky behaviour, that people get to the point when they're not prepared to wait for the next green signal and make their move. And so we had concerns about that. And I think as members can see, there are certain issues around then legibility, connections to various precincts north and south of the corridor, and the south side option. So you can see a number of red boxes, i.e. general disadvantages. It's not all black and white with these things. It's you know, there are nuances within a number of these, but broadly the issues shown green there, they broadly favoured that the south side worked well for, and obviously good connections to the South Frame, and most importantly, as far as this issue is before council today, most importantly it moved the matter away from the interchange entrance. If that was the only issue we were concerned about, the interchange entrance, well then obviously that scores very well. Coming over the page then on the Chewham, on the northern side, then I think as council can see there are, from that workshop and from the further analyses, a larger number of green boxes there. A larger number of issues where the north side facility favours cycle safety, favours the legibility of the network, but of course, as far as the matter before council today, number 5 there, the disadvantage of that, of course, is that it needs a solution to the interchange entry. Yeah, so hopefully everyone has that.
So,
now.
can are you going to carry on? Yep.
So at that point, Madam Chairman, we then started to focus on how could we provide appropriate mitigation at the bus exchange entry point. And at that point, in the draft designs of the interchange itself, we were not proposing signal control. So it would have worked quite simply as the old interchange did, accessed off of Lichfield Street. In other words, buses would have entered there across the footpath and into the interchange. So because this issue was raised, the subsequent designs are for signalled entry, both on the Chewham Street entry to the interchange and indeed on the Lichfield Street entrance as well, which carries buses to and from Manchester Street. There are effectively two intersections, two simple intersections that cyclists and pedestrians will be required to yield to entering buses from Chewham Street at that point. But what we're looking at then is something between 36 and 50 buses an hour entering at that point. So probably one bus within each signal cycle entering there. It is a very simple, standard, signalled arrangement for that interchange entry, and I think Richard is distributing some images for you at the moment of what that looks like. It is a very simple layout. The key beneficiaries of some of this process, Madam Chair, have actually been pedestrians. The previous interchange had pedestrian safety problems that the contraflow bus lane that Environment Canterbury raised with Council yesterday, which was counterintuitive because we had a contraflow bus lane coming through to the Colombo Street intersection. I'm sure many members will remember that.
We do.
A small number of crashes there between buses and pedestrians, no crashes between buses and cyclists, but the crashes were actually at the Colombo Lichfield Street intersection, where pedestrians were stepping into the road, not expecting a bus coming at them from the left-hand side. It is almost the same issue that was in our mind in not favouring the south side cycle facility, because again, like that contraflow bus lane, it is broadly counterintuitive. So the beneficiaries of this, as I say, have been actually, in many respects, pedestrians, because we do have now fully signal-controlled accesses that will safely enable pedestrians and people with mobility impairments to cross both the Lichfield and Chewham Street entrances. And so all of the designs, which are still being refined now, and all of the safety audits of those, work on that basis.